The American market operates on a simple premise: infinite opportunity. But built into that same system is a recurring, mathematical tax: catastrophic fraud. When we look at the biggest financial disasters in history, it is tempting to view them as freak occurrences or ghost stories. They aren't. They are predictable, mechanical failures of human trust. This timeline maps 10 of the largest American scams by their financial and societal impact. Down here, the Fire Festival barely registers as a tiny dot, while the 2008 financial crisis dominates the board as a massive sphere. While the dollar amounts fluctuate wildly across these events, the underlying mechanics do not. The specific tactics used to bypass human skepticism remain nearly identical across the decades. Analyzing these events reveals the specific price tag of blind trust in today's market. This creates a problem for anyone putting capital to work. How do you mathematically distinguish a genuinely asymmetrical opportunity from a trap specifically engineered to exploit your blind spots? To answer that, we have to change how we evaluate these events. Instead of categorizing them by how the mechanics worked, we need to categorize them by the psychological profile of the investor they targeted. Most participants fall into one of three vulnerable profiles: the budget-conscious yield seeker, the FOMO-driven optimizer, and the time-poor institutional participant. Scammers rarely invent new desires out of thin air. They simply identify what a specific group wants and offer a shortcut that bypasses the standard friction of risk and effort. Delegating your due diligence to a charismatic founder or a prestigious institution saves you time up front, but it leaves you fully exposed to total, unrecoverable loss. Let's look at the first category: the risk-averse investor. This profile demands high market returns, but refuses to accept the mathematical reality of market volatility. Bernie Madoff's $60 billion scheme relied entirely on this specific vulnerability. Madoff hooked investors by promising impossibly steady, unbroken month-over-month dividend returns. He completely ignored the broader economic realities that drive actual market fluctuations. Alan Stanford ran a parallel $7 billion operation by selling the exact same illusion: a safe, high-yield harbor through offshore investments. The mechanical reality behind both operations was identical. They generated zero underlying asset yield. Instead, they took the liquidity from new investors and handed it directly to early investors. This diagram shows the required cash flow for that structure to survive. Notice how the capital flows straight from a new investor node into an early investor node, completely bypassing the actual market asset. If an asset's returns do not fluctuate with the broader market, the risk hasn't been eliminated. It has simply been converted into a 100% guarantee of total principal loss the moment new liquidity dries up. Our second profile is the FOMO-driven optimizer. This is the participant seeking the prestige and equity upside of early adoption, usually in tech or culture. Theranos and its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, weaponized this specific Silicon Valley hype cycle to defraud investors and patients alike. The marketing claim was perfectly tailored for optimizers: proprietary technology capable of running hundreds of complex medical tests from a single drop of blood. The reality was hidden behind strict non-disclosure agreements. The data was kept private and unpeer-reviewed because they were actually running standard venous draws through competitor machines. We see the exact same mechanic in culture with the Fire Festival. Organizer Billy McFarland sold a purely narrative-driven vision of a luxury music festival without any underlying logistical validation to support it. Both of these situations replaced verifiable engineering with aggressive marketing, forcing investors and consumers to buy into a mirage. Bypassing independent mechanical validation just to secure early adopter prestige means accepting a massive asymmetrical risk. The underlying product may have zero value. The final and most dangerous profile is the time-poor passive participant. This person manages complex systems by relying entirely on institutional safeguards to do the vetting for them. When Enron collapsed in 2001, it wiped out thousands of jobs and savings. This was one of the most celebrated and supposedly vetted companies in the world. Enron utilized a trick called mark-to-market accounting. This is an accounting method that allows a company to book theoretical future profits immediately. By doing this, they legally hid massive corporate debt from passive index investors who only looked at top-line earnings. WorldCom executed an $11 billion accounting fraud using the exact same systemic exploit of passive trust. This chart shows the gap between the audited illusion and mathematical reality. While reported revenue grows steadily upward, a hidden secondary line plummets deep into the red, representing the actual debt load accumulating off the books. What makes this catastrophic is that blue-chip auditing firms stamped these synthetic metrics as perfectly safe, failing to perform the exact function the passive investor was paying them for. Delegating your financial due diligence entirely to third-party reputations makes you immediate collateral damage when systemic corporate frauds finally break. Institutional betrayal extends from corporate balance sheets into massive macroeconomic and political structures. In the 1980s, the savings and loan crisis saw hundreds of banks fail due to risky investments and internal fraud, forcing a $160 billion bailout paid for by taxpayers. The 2008 financial crisis proves how devastating this institutional betrayal becomes at a global scale. Prestigious banks took highly volatile, toxic subprime loans and repackaged them as perfectly safe, AAA-rated investments. They sold poison disguised as medicine to the global market. We see the same exploitation of public trust in the political sphere. In the 1920s, Interior Secretary Albert Fall secretly leased U.S. government oil reserves to private companies without bidding, taking massive bribes in the Teapot Dome scandal. Decades later, the Watergate scandal revealed illegal spying and cover-ups at the highest level of government, ultimately forcing President Richard Nixon to resign. The harsh reality of systemic scams is how the damage is distributed. Passive participants, taxpayers and employees, lose their homes and jobs, while the architects of the deception often escape severe punishment. Too big to fail is a marketing myth. Systemic size actually insulates the architects of the fraud while maximizing the blast radius for the passive public. Neutralizing these traps requires a structural defense instead of a reliance on intuition. This chart maps the required due diligence for each investor profile when evaluating a new opportunity. It forces you through 3 specific checkpoints: zero volatility, secret tech, and too big to fail. If you are a yield seeker and an asset promises returns that defy the market, assume it is synthetic. You have to audit the underlying mechanics generating the yield, not just look at the payout history. If you are an optimizer evaluating a revolutionary claim, require revolutionary, peer-reviewed evidence. If the technology is a guarded black box, walk away immediately. If you are a passive participant, radical diversification is your only mathematical defense. Never concentrate your career, retirement, and investments in a single entity, regardless of its institutional prestige. There is an uncomfortable truth here. The 2008 crisis proves that sometimes a passive investor can do everything right and still get hit by systemic failure. Total avoidance of risk is impossible, but building structural firewalls to limit your exposure is entirely within your control. Your best defense against fraud isn't perfectly predicting the future. It is structuring your investments and your career so that no single deception can wipe you out completely.